Hey, welcome to the Sales Leader Council webinar series sponsored by the Sales Collective. My name is Shawn Buxton. I head up all the sales leadership and management here at the Sales Collective. I'm happy to be joined by one of my favorite colleagues today, Tabitha Cavanaugh. Welcome, Tab.
Hey, hey, I'm excited.
I see some familiar faces. What's up, Anthony? You don't have to come off mute. You
Hey,
wait.
Sean, how are you? Good to
Good,
see
buddy.
you.
Good. Nice to have you here, Robin. Nice to have you here as well as others. A little
Yeah.
bit about Tabitha. You should know that she's an online celebrity, so to speak.
My God.
Yeah, she's
I should
com-
never let you host this. Why did we let this happen? Who
yeah.
approved it?
I like to describe her as computer famous. Tab, you might know Tab as Tab the recruiter. That's her. She's so good at what she does. They just named her the recruiter. So I actually followed Tab for a long time before she ever came to work at the Sales Collective, and then she joined our team, and we spent a lot of time together. We're good friends, and so I'm really excited to have Tab with me today, talking about how to hire your next top seller. So, Tab, I don't want to waste any time. We have a lot to talk about today, and I want to make sure everybody gets access to all your expertise. So, I'm going to just jump right in if that's okay with you.
Let's do it.
So, let's start with just kind of a big question. Why is hiring salespeople so hard? I mean, I know we've all hired probably people that aren't in sales roles. It does seem objectively easier. But when we hire salespeople, I remember I had a mentor of mine that says, uh, hiring salespeople is hard. It's like getting married on the second date, right? It's easy to get wrong and it's expensive when you do. So, in your opinion, why is hiring salespeople so hard?
Yeah, it's honestly really hard. It is, even though I've been recruiting for 8 years, it's just a hard thing to do. I mean, think about the recruitment and hiring boom we had a handful of years ago. Companies had all this money, especially in tech, and they were able to just go out and hire all these specialized salespeople. So we're not looking at the holistic salesperson that can do a little bit of everything. Now you're looking at, okay, SDR, BDR, whatever you want to call it, that does that beginning phase, right? The business development. And then you've got the AE, or again, titles vary, but for all intents and purposes, you have the AE that can now take that meeting from the SDR, didn't have to go do that business development piece, and now they're kind of moving forward with it. And then again, even insert customer success now that sort of takes that and continues on with the renewals, the upsells. Now, again, every business looks different, which is why it's a loaded question. But now we're looking at companies starting to lean out. They can't hire all those specialized positions, and now they need these salespeople to do every step of the full sales cycle. And there's not a ton of salespeople out there that have done that. Mix that with AI, writing resumes for people. They're all sounding the same, so it's harder to narrow the pool that way. I mean, again, loaded question, but those are a couple of the reasons that it is really, really challenging to hire salespeople nowadays.
When companies are seeking to hire their first person, what do you think the biggest mistake they're making that maybe making the job harder for them?
Oh, I mean, not telling the truth internally is a big one I see. And when you don't have that truth internally, it makes it really hard to find that right alignment. So that's a big problem. And even if you are telling the truth internally, you have things that come into play, like blindly accepting referrals from those around you. You're like, oh, I really like Joe Bob over here in finance. He sent me over a salesperson. This person's got to be great. He's talked him up so much. Meanwhile, Joe Bob in finance doesn't know anything about sales, or maybe a little bit. We'll say a little bit about sales,
Mhm.
but doesn't really have any idea. I've never asked their friend. They just like hang out on a Friday night and drink beer or whatever, go bowling, anything, insert activity or so. Yeah, I mean, that's another mistake I see. And then also, once you get into a conversation with someone, is hiring for personality. They're like, oh, I really like this person. We had a great conversation. They look back, I'm like, I'm pressing my clients on, okay, great. What questions did you ask them? How did they answer them? And they're like, oh yeah, I think back and they really just gave me surface level fluffy answers. that were very theoretical, and they didn't actually give me a real example of how they did the thing. So now you're hiring someone that knows how to talk about it. And again, with this day and age, I actually had a client who said that the candidate was looking off screen a lot and they didn't understand why. And I don't have a story ending to this that we know what happened, but we were very we were speculating that maybe they were looking at ChatGPT or something on their other screen, typing in the questions and then answering based on what ChatGPT was saying. So again, if you're slick, you can make that sound really good, especially on a phone screen where someone can't see your face. So as hiring teams, we have to look at some of those different things that maybe you wouldn't have had to think about before, the pauses that someone might be taking, or the way they're saying something. If it feels so scripted, we have to
Mhm.
be good at throwing them off script and asking them, going down rabbit holes and getting them to speak more specifically about what they've been doing. So, yeah.
I want to go back to something you mentioned in passing there. You said telling the truth. Companies telling the truth. What do you mean by that?
Well, I've seen it happen time and time again with hiring teams, and even people that have told me, once you get in there as a recruiter and you uncover, they're like, I've been told not to tell the truth. I've been told to not talk about the challenges that we're having. I've been told to, just talk about all the quote unquote great things, right? Like the fun bingo and the happy hours and the this and the that, but they're skipping some of the things that would make the right person want to run towards this job, and making instead the wrong people are choosing the job and then getting in and realizing that's just not right. So that's what I start with all of my clients. With all growth begins by telling the truth. A leader, my first recruitment leader told me that, and it stuck with me. And I love it so much because if we don't tell the truth, then we're not going to get anywhere. If they don't tell themselves the truth internally, then they're not going to tell me the truth as their recruiter. And then how am I supposed to then tell the candidates the truth? Right. And it's like a, a what do you call like a domino effect, of
Mhm.
of a bunch of lies going out the door, and then how could you ever possibly expect to get the right person in that seat?
Yeah, essentially where the company is trying to sell themselves, sell the role to the individual. I know as a salesperson myself, I interviewed for lots of sales jobs. What's your opinion on telling the truth when it comes to compensation? Because ultimately, I mean, that's why that person's applying for the job, right? They want to get paid, especially if they're a salesperson. In sharing the truth about compensation, do you do that early in the process? Do you put it in the job description? Do you put it in that first conversation? Where do you recommend people, or do you save it till the end and then we negotiate? What's
Yeah,
your
and then
opinion
we
on
just like slam them at the end with a low ball offer, right?
that?
No, so there's pay transparency laws out there today. So I encourage everyone to look up if you're how your state falls in the legality of that. But I encourage all of my clients to, if I'm allowed, I put it in the job ad. So if they're telling me I'm not allowed to do that and I confirm that it's not a pay transparency state, so legally that's okay, then it's in the first conversation. Hard stop. So I do not leave the first conversation without figuring out what that person's desired compensation is. Now, let me reiterate that. Does their desired compensation, this is not, so tell me, what did you make at your last job? No,
Hmm.
we can't ask that question, right? Again, so we want to protect ourselves and protect them. They might be getting severely underpaid. I have met many people that were, when they told me, when they did disclose that what they were making, I was like, I wait, what? Like, are you serious? Okay. So you've got some people that are underpaid, and there's multitude of reasons there. But yeah, first conversation, hard stop. And then it continues throughout the process. So the further we get in the interview process and the hiring process, every time I debrief with that candidate after they've had a conversation with the hiring team, I ask them, are we still aligned on compensation? I get them to say the number again where they want to be. And I don't deal in large ranges, because if you tell me, oh, I'll somewhere between 95 and 130. Okay, well, you just heard 130. My
Hmm.
client just heard 95. So we can't play in that gray area.
Got it. Got it. Yeah. I know this webinar is for sales leaders, but what would you advise somebody as a candidate when somebody asks them that question? Because I know you don't want to shoot yourself in the foot, right? You want the job, or you think you might want the job, and you might take 120, but you'd really like, of course, more than that, 130 or something. When someone asks you, what did you make at your last job? What should you say?
I mean, I just let them know, that's a hard one because they might not want to say, "You're not allowed to ask me this." They also might not know that that is illegal in many cases for them to be asked that question. So honestly, a lot of candidates are probably just going to answer it. Which is why when I coach them, I do coach them to let someone know instead of saying, "Oh, I was making XYZ," just answer that question by letting someone know what you would like to make in your next position.
Should they give them a range or a specific number?
I'm okay with a small range. I am okay if someone lets me know, like, hey, I'm looking to make somewhere between 100 and 110. And then I can confirm if the position is even paying that. But again,
Mhm.
it all comes back to telling the truth on the candidate side as well. Because if money is your motivator, I've been in positions, let's say, where I needed a certain amount, but I didn't need a ton more than that, or other things were outweighing that. So maybe I could take a lower base because I was okay that they had free healthcare, right, for my family and myself, or there were other perks that really made it attractive to me. So again, that comes down to either the recruiter or the hiring manager asking the right questions to the candidate to uncover those motivators. If someone is super money motivated, then I know if they tell me they need 150 and I'm at like a 130, that's not going to happen. You know what I mean? Especially if that's where they're coming from. Don't try to force fit it. Don't try to keep moving them along in the process just to, again, like you said, at the end, hope, oh, we've told them enough, we've sold them enough on our company that they'll just be willing to accept. No, I mean, have that ongoing conversation. We cannot meet you at 150. We can get to 130, and here are some of our other perks and benefits. But really, before that is uncovering again, what do they care about? Because when you
Mhm.
uncover what they care about, you know in your head whether or not you have those things. If you don't have those things, let them go. Otherwise, you're just wasting. I don't care how great of a candidate they are, unless you can meet them, something is going to unravel either in the hiring process and you're going to have wasted a bunch of people's time, or once you've hired that person. So you have to just tell that truth right up front.
And I think for different candidates, they have different priorities, right? I know for me, quality of life, the people I work with, work life balance, all that kind of stuff, the culture is really important to me. So I might be willing to take less if I get to work with cool people, if I get to learn,
Yeah.
if you're gonna let me off early to go see my son's swim meet, whatever, things like that, right? Like
Yeah.
that's worth something to me. But that's just me. Some people are purely money motivated, and they say, hey, it's all about the money for me.
Mhm.
And I'd like them to be truthful with me about the range and not wait after we've done 5 interviews to tell me what it is and kind of surprise me. I know there were times as a candidate where I felt like they had strung me along in the process, and I was so invested by the sixth interview and the panel interviews and all this stuff that I was like, well, I'm here now, and this has taken a month and a half, 2 months to get through. You almost feel like you're willing to compromise a little bit what you really needed, not what you wanted, but what you needed as a candidate. What's the danger in that? Like if we take these, and then we're going to talk more specifically about process in a minute here, but what's the danger in kind of that strategy as a leader thinking, number one, it's a little dishonest and manipulative, I think. But what's the danger in that for leaders?
I mean, you're going to get a candidate to the end who's going to say no. And then what? You've wasted all of your whoever, insert whoever's in that process with you, which nowadays feels like sometimes it could be a lot of people involved in the process. So you're wasting everyone's time just to get to the end. And I mean, what is that costing you, right? Maybe you're passing on other candidates that would have been a better fit or still equally as good of a fit, but meanwhile you're taking someone to the end stage. And trust me, if you're not communicating with them, they're not communicating with you either. They're not telling you about the other positions they're being recruited for or that they're entertaining. So
Hmm.
you're going to get to the end and think, oh, we're going into a final round with this person. Like, we're good. We're going to have this signed, sealed, delivered. Meanwhile, in that person, in the back of their head, they're thinking, this isn't the compensation I want. Or worse, they haven't even told me. I was just talking to a friend the other day who was interviewing for a position, and they're like, it's like the third interview and they still haven't told me what they're paying for this position. I'm like, whoa, hard stop. You need to bring it up. But candidates are afraid to bring it up. They're afraid, oh, if I'm going to look like all I care about is money. But I mean, at the end of the day, they have a budget, you have a budget. Does it meet?
Yeah.
Does it not meet? So there's a lot of risks, and you're going to just lose the candidate, right? You're going to lose respect. You're going to lose, potentially damage your reputation, because people talk and they'll say, oh, don't interview with that company, So yeah.
I think even worst case scenario is you end up hiring them, right? And they take less
Oh
because
yeah.
they just are kind of like worn out by the process. You hire them, and as a leader now, you have someone on your team that's not really sold on being on your team. And
Yeah. Oh, and they're still looking.
yeah, exactly. And
They'll
I
take
think,
the job and then they'll keep interviewing elsewhere. And then a month later, or 2 months, or 3 months, when they find a better job, they're gone. And then
yep.
now, how much time have you invested in them? That is where more of those costs come in when you're okay. Now you've onboarded them, you've given them equipment, you've flown them into your home office, like in whatever other costs you have when you're doing general onboarding with a new employee.
Awesome. Next question for you. What trends are you seeing in sales hiring today, and how should companies adjust their approach to stay competitive? We've touched on a few of these. Is there anything else you would add?
Just that companies are so focused a lot of the time on hiring someone from their industry. And so you're not able to stay competitive that way. Most companies that I work with don't have all the bells and whistles to just purely attract talent and pull them away from, if they're a top performer at another company within one of your competitors, you have to have something that's going to be attractive to them to pull a top performer out of that role. You have a much better chance of pulling a top performer out of a company that's not in your industry, someone that is maybe wanting to make a move. Plus, when you start to get people from the same industry and they're like that, what do you call, like historic, job, not job hopper in that they move a lot, but job hopper in the fact that you've seen them work for every one of your competitors. Well,
Mhm.
now what? They're going to go to the market and try to tell the market that this is now the best product or service. But wait, I thought the
Mhm.
last product or service was, and the one before that, and the one before that, right? So I think that's, I don't know if you call it a trend, but it's definitely something I'm seeing with a lot of people that are saying we want someone from our industry. We want a plug and play candidate. But because of the nature of how the market is right now, it's flooded with candidates. We're in an employer's market, so employers can be a bit more picky about
Mhm.
who they're choosing. But it does take longer. It's just the more parameters you put on a search, the harder it is going to be to find that top performer. You could find anyone, right? You could find the bottom performer that was just let go because of their performance, but do you want that person, or would you rather have a top performer from another industry who's proven that they were able to switch industries a few different times, pick it up very quickly, and be successful?
Yeah, in our leadership program, the Sales Leader Triumph, we talk about this. Some industries are more specific than others in the knowledge they need. And so one of the things we talk about is getting very clear on what your ultimate salesperson looks like, and looking at three areas: the knowledge that you want them to have coming in, which may be industry specific knowledge, like expertise, if you have a very technical industry, the skills, the things you want them to be able to be good at or do, which are usually around sales skills or prospecting, things like that. And then the attributes, like what kind of person are they? And yeah, I think it's important to be open minded and think, is this something we could teach people? Because knowledge you can teach. You could take a month and train somebody on the vocabulary, the vernacular, maybe even enough of the technical specs that they could apply their skills that they have in sales and their great attributes they have, but you could teach them the industry and being open minded to that. But also at the same time, understanding if no, that's not the case for us. We can't take 6 months to onboard somebody and teach them our industry, but just really knowing what kind of candidate you're looking for.
Yeah.
Any other trends that you would comment on?
Um, I mean, that's the biggest one that's top of mind for me right now, is just seeing a lot of people trying to pull top performers and not having, I mean, there's something out there for everybody, right? But when you don't have what some of your competitors have. Again, you have to know, like, what are their main motivators. I'm working for a client right now. And again, it's pulling from a competitor type of situation. Um, and so I'm having to consider other things. And one of the things I was able to surface through my research was figuring out some of their competitors that are having major issues with leadership turnover. It's a lot of chaos. And because of that, people are very unsettled. So when I'm reaching out to people, my messaging can be more specific around a stable, family owned type of company with a lot of longevity, history of paying out their bonuses, things like that, because now I know what persona I'm speaking to.
Mhm.
So I think that's something else that people need to consider is when you know who you're speaking to, you can cater your message, um, and have a better response rate. So yeah,
All right, let's talk about the hiring process. Let's get into that. I alluded to earlier that some of these hiring processes are getting ridiculous, and I think it comes from a fear of hiring the wrong person. Right? They've made a mistake a couple times. They got burnt, and so now they think longer is better. So instead of a 30-day process, we've got a 60-day process. Or instead of 2 interviews or 3 interviews, now we've got 6 and a panel or something like that. Tell me a little bit about not necessarily like what the right length is, because I think that differs depending on
it
the
does.
industry. But what does a solid hiring process look like? Soup to nuts.
Yeah. Well, I'll say first that the hiring process, what really matters is that you have the right people involved. It's not so much how many people. And I know sometimes I have come across organizations that were like, well, we need this person and this person and this person. I'm like, okay, let's take a breath for 1 second and just talk about like why. So if you're at a company that they feel like a lot of people need to be involved, I understand there's internal politics sometimes. Maybe you can't be this direct, but the general idea is that you're asking why. Why does this person need to be involved? And genuinely understanding why that person needs to be involved, and then almost helping the other person come to the conclusion of, maybe they don't need to be involved, right? And so starting there with who needs to be involved and deciding how you're going to decide before you even move forward. But again, it comes back to the very first piece of advice and consultative advice that I give my clients is to start by telling the truth. We've talked about that, so I won't go into too much detail there, but that is literally where we start. We have a kickoff call. We come together to really understand not only the position but the company, the dynamics of the team. What do you currently have and what is missing? So you're looking at now, okay, what gaps can we fill? You don't really need to replicate your top performer. They're a top performer for a reason. We can look at some of the same competencies, but we need to also figure out where else we can fill in the gap so we have a well-rounded type of team with people with different skills that can do different things. Maybe your top performer isn't great at social media and you really need someone who can come in and start social selling. So now we're looking for someone that has that attribute. Maybe they already have that in their toolbox, right? So some of those things to think about, but I always do the intake call for at least an hour. And if you don't have a recruiter to help you, I would just encourage you to sit down with yourself, even record yourself answering the questions out loud and go back and listen to what you said, because you'll probably fill out an intake form. If you were just to type or, write, you'll probably fill it out a little bit differently than if you were just having a natural conversation with someone. That's why I do it out loud with my clients, because they'll say things they don't even realize they're saying, but I just heard it and it's going to be the
Mhm.
perfect thing for me to put in their job ad, or the perfect little tidbit for me to be able to tell a candidate that makes them really unique. And so that's some of the first beginning stages of how we're putting together the sales hiring process. So from there, then you take all of those notes and turn them into a job ad. So you should have two things: a job description, which is an internal kind of list of responsibilities and things you need this person to do. And then you need a job ad. And those are very often intermixed, even though they shouldn't be. I see a lot of job descriptions posted online. But what you really need is marketing collateral, which is the story that you're painting, the picture that you're, painting for the person reading the job ad. So that's the next thing I craft as a job ad. And people say, "Oh, if you're a real recruiter, you don't even use job ads," right? But that's not true, because you're really looking at all the different places that you might be able to capture the right person for your team. And a job ad is one of those areas. So I've had it out there, and sometimes I've had someone apply for one role they weren't the right fit for, but they were the perfect fit for another area that I could
Mhm.
go down. So just another, especially if you're in corporate, and you're looking at, well, what other departments do we have? Maybe this person won't be a great salesperson, but wow, they could be a really great customer success person or customer support or something. So it's like having your head on a swivel so you can always be anticipating where else this person could be a good fit, or thinking about them for the future, and starting to pipeline for the future. So pipelining, we think about sales pipeline. I mean, building a bench is also something you think about during the process, because you might come across someone that you see great potential in, but today they can't sit in that seat. So that's somebody that you're like, oh, check, I need to keep in touch with them for the future and
Mhm.
actually keep in touch with them. Uh,
I can hear sales managers right now saying, "Oh, HR does that for me." What do you think about that?
I mean, are they though? I mean, especially HR that is not solely a recruitment function, are like, are they? They have a lot of other things to do that are not recruitment related. So if they are, and that they are, then great, congratulations. You've got an awesome HR person. Don't let go of them. um, but that's another thing to think about if you're just sidebar, if you're hiring a recruiter,
Mhm.
is what does their network look like? Do they have a lot of referrals and testimonials from people they've worked with in the past? Um, so I won't go too far down that rabbit hole, but just something to think about, because they're the face of your company. Are they representing you well in the market? And internally, can they help influence within your team? So anyway, job ad. After the job ad, we start, let's say, okay, we'll fast forward, we'll start sourcing, we'll start reviewing applicants, start reaching out, etc., scheduling phone screens. From there, we're getting people on the phone, we're vetting them and evaluating them. Again, so me, as I'm the recruiter in this, so I'm always the first step. I'm the gatekeeper. And from there, once I see a candidate that I think could be a great fit, I'm moving straight to the sales DNA. So it's the sales specific assessment that we use, that I love. It is not a magic bullet. It is not 100% guaranteed, but nothing is, and anyone that tries to tell you otherwise is lying to you. So this is just one thing that I use in our process, again, as part of the holistic picture, looking at a candidate. So I've got their resume, I've got my notes from our conversation, I've got the sales DNA that's measuring different competencies in top performing salespeople. We're not looking at a sales personality. We're not looking at a math test. We're looking at what are the different competencies that this person has. And that's really where you get into the crux of the hiring process, which is especially when you're evaluating, well, any talent, not even just, because you can't assume that someone coming from your industry has the right competencies, but you're looking at kind of what Shawn started to say, someone's will to sell. And that's really those ingrained competencies. So think things like their commitments, their desire, like how excited are they? Do they want to be a top performer even? Because somebody could be doing well, but they could have no desire to be great, right? And so over time, that will diminish their output. Their accountability, can someone actually take responsibility, or are they just going to blame the fact that the sun was out today and it was too bright and they can't, or it's too hot, right? I see home team here, so I know you guys probably come across that a lot too, where people are just like, oh, but the weather, right? And so you're looking at those different things, and then someone's motivators. So again, why do they get up every day? Why do they want to be in sales? What are they working for? The more you know about that, the more you can know if your environment is the right environment for them. If they're a super externally motivated person, and you don't have those types of things in your environment, maybe you don't do the contests, you don't dangle the carrot. Well, are they going to be, they're great somewhere else, but are they going to be great for you? Like,
Mm.
probably not, right? Or maybe not. I can't say without all the other factors, but so we're using the DNA to measure all of these types of competencies down to the tactical, which I say tactical trainable. So similar to what you said, Shawn, there's going to be things you can train. The question is, can you train them? Do you want to? Do you have the time, the resources, etc., to get this person up to speed? If the answer is no, do not hire them. They might,
Mm.
especially if they're, depending on who they are, they might completely fall flat in your environment. So once we get through all that, then I'm starting to move them forward into the interview process to meet with my clients. And but before before we do that, we're deciding again on the process. And so that's something really important is again, who needs to be involved? Set the stages and then stick to them unless you absolutely have to change them for some reason. So once we determine, okay, Tab, she's the first person that this candidate's going to speak with. Then we're going to the sales DNA. What comes next is usually a hiring manager interview. They're going to be the decision maker. They need to be early in the process, not at the end. Because if your
Mhm.
entire team loves the candidate, but the final interviews with the hiring manager and the hiring manager doesn't jive with them, now you've just wasted everybody's time.
Mhm.
So put them right at the front of the hiring process. That's my recommendation. And then from there, usually recommend some type of, again, if you have another leader that you need them to meet with, I try to put people together where you can, but not so many. You're thinking maybe 2 to 4 max on a panel. I don't really like when I start to see 8 to 10 people on a panel. Maybe we could split those up between 2 different interviews. Um, so the second after a hiring manager would be more around that. It would be
Okay.
more around some sort of like maybe 2 people, maybe 3, if you want to call it a panel or a group, whatever you want to call it. And then maybe you bring some people back together if you feel like you need to, or at some point as a next step would be maybe a role play or
Yeah.
something like that. So I'm getting into the weeds here, but I just want you to understand like how I walk through this in case it's helpful for.
No, I think it's good. I think this is what people are curious about. I think it's obvious. I don't really dig panel interviews. The reason I don't like panel interviews is because I don't feel people prepare for them because they think,
Yeah,
oh, I'm going to be on a panel, right? So I'm going to have Ty and Jimmy and Josh and Anthony. They're all going to be there with me. They're going to have their own questions. So I'm only going to get like 1 or 2 questions. And what I found is those questions are either like some kind of gotcha question where they can feel like, ooh, that was a good question. Look what I did, right? Like that kind of thing. Or like they're almost there to impress their peers more than they're there to interview the candidate. Or it's a softball question because they're just winging it. And the team doesn't necessarily get together beforehand and go through a specific interview structure strategy to really prove or disprove that this person has what we're looking for or doesn't have what they're looking for. And that's, we're very intentional in the sales leadership program about what does the interview look like. It has a framework that we're going to follow. It's not just you 5 minutes before glossing over their LinkedIn, then jumping on and go, oh, so tell me about yourself, right? Like
yeah,
those kind of interviews, preparing actual specific questions that you want to ask that aren't questions like, well, we're a team and we like to work hard here. So do you like to work hard? Do you like being part of a team? Like these easy answers that anybody knows what you want them to say.
right.
And they're kind of a pseudo ad for your company. It's like an opportunity for you to brag. Oh, we really work hard here. It's more about promoting the team or your company to that person than it is really finding anything specific about them. That's my take on panel interviews, but nobody's here to hear what I have to say.
No,
So,
I agree. And you actually reminded me of something I didn't mention. I forgot to mention the scorecard. That's another thing that I always make sure my clients have is, and I have them fill it out. Now I'm there to take a look at anything if they need me to put my eyes on it, but a scorecard is really important because you're breaking down the different competency areas that matter in your environment. So we're not just talking generic sales questions. We're making sure that they're really closely aligned with your environment, what you're trying to accomplish, what your team already looks like, where the gaps are that you need filled in. And then underneath of each of those competency areas, you get more specific with questions that you can ask.
uh-huh.
And so, like you said, to your point now, you're putting it you're giving them something tangible that you could say, all right, interviewer number 1, you're going to cover this competency and these questions. Interview 2, same, so on and so forth. So if you are going to go into a panel, you have to be prepared because you'll shoot yourself in the foot. Candidates are not stupid. I mean, top candidates, they're going to look at you and say, wow, they were so disorganized. Do
Hmm.
I want to work for a company that
Yeah.
because you're presenting as well. And if you think for 1 second that you're not presenting yourselves for, some sort of like judgment, right or wrong, right, during the interview process, candidates, you're looking at them, they're looking at you. So yeah, it's really important to have that stuff together.
Well, and we are emphasizing in this webinar how to hire like a rock star, right? We want
Yeah.
somebody that's really good. So they're going to have other opportunities. And so I think they definitely are evaluating you just as much as you're evaluating them throughout the process. Range of number of interviews, like I just give me a ballpark. I know it could be different depending on how big the company is, et cetera.
Yeah.
But
I like
are you thinking
to
like 2 to 3, 3 to 5, 6 to 10? What are you thinking?
definitely like somewhere between 25 and 40, if we can
Yes.
help it, at least over a 4-month period. Uh, no, I like a good 3-step process. And that I consider 3 steps after the recruiter. So if you have a recruiter, and then the sales DNA. Those are really steps 1 and 2, but again, those are kind of pre-process because those are what I'm using to vet a candidate before my client ever sees them. So once I get them to my client, for them, it's a 3-step process, which is again typically the hiring manager, some type of a second interview. Again, not a huge group interview, but something where you're getting another set of eyes and ears on
Mhm.
this person. It's not just up to you to make a siloed, maybe biased decision. And then again, something at the end, maybe it's some sort of a presentation or a role play. But I do want to preface this by saying we're not asking candidates to spend hours and hours on anything. And if you are going to have them do a presentation, I highly recommend having them do a presentation on something they're already familiar with. Do not
Mhm.
have them present on your company. Okay. And the reason that we do this is because when they present on something that you're telling them, pick something you like, something you're passionate about, something you're knowledgeable about. If
Mhm.
they mess that up, now you really have a good idea of maybe this person isn't going to be the right fit. They're not going to come in and just figure it out, right? Because you try to have them present on your company and they don't know
Yeah.
you, they don't know your nuances, they don't know your product, your service, etc. So that's my recommendation for that. And Shawn, you have a great role play recommendation, so I'm going to let you give your role play recommendation.
Yeah, we have what we call the ninja move in the leadership program in when it comes to the interview process. So yeah, I'm big on role play. Uh, I've done it my whole career. I think it's important. A lot of people don't want to do it because they say, "Oh, I don't, you know, I don't want to put a bunch of pressure." I'm like, I do. I want to see how they operate under pressure. Sales is about execution and executing when money is on the line and you're under pressure. So I want to see how you handle it. Doesn't mean you have to ace it for me to hire you, but I do want to see your reaction to the pressure. So we usually, I usually role play for some kind of skill. So let's say in our particular business, like you have to handle a lot of price objections. So I'll set it up and I'll say, "Hey, Tab, in this role, we are in deep competition against people, and a lot of times price comes up. We're not the cheapest solution. So I'd like to take a minute and role play with you on how you would handle the price objection." And we will let them do that again to your point from something maybe like the last job they had where they were selling, for the details, the intricate stuff. I'm not making them handle the price objection for us, but I just want to see how they handle a price objection. And I ask them, would you be okay with that? And I'm already looking and reading body language to see how they react. If they start, kind of fidgeting around, if they get irritated, right? Whatever kind of bodily reactions, physical reactions I can see from them, I'm reading into that and seeing how are they handling the pressure. Then we do the role play. The role play doesn't need to be long. It'd be, like a minute or two. And after that, then I want to make sure that I give them some feedback. And I usually say, "Hey, you did this right. I really like this. I really like this." But I am actually looking, even if I don't really think it's wrong, I'm looking for 1 or 2 things that they could do differently. Even if I have to make them up, I don't care because I want to give them that feedback, see how they receive that feedback, see if they give me the classic, "Oh, well, yeah, I mean, in real life, I can do this." That whole excuse that people give when they're role playing as to why they did poorly. I don't want to hear that because that speaks to me that there might be a low responsibility score to match up with, or somebody that is always going to look for a reason why they didn't perform. I'd rather them just say, "Yeah, I was nervous," right? Or whatever. Or yeah, I didn't do great. Oh, that's good feedback. Thanks. I'll use that. And then what I'm going to do, the ninja move then is say, "Great. Do you have any questions?" And give them a chance to ask me any questions about the role play. At this point, they want to get out of the role play because role plays are hard and they're uncomfortable. And they say, "No, I'm good." And they're thinking, "Whew, I made it through that," right? This is when I say, great, let's run it again. Exact same scenario. That's the ninja move because now I am measuring for an attribute. I'm looking for an attribute, and the attribute is coachability. For me, I want three attributes when I hire somebody. When I hire a salesperson, I want them to have integrity because I can't work with you if you're going to lie to me or cut corners. Number two, I want you to have self motivation because I'm not here to motivate you. I'm not a cheerleader. I don't look good in a miniskirt. And then number three, I want you to be coachable. If you have those three attributes, then we got something to work with. So I said, great, let's run it again. And now I'm listening to see if they can actually apply what we talked about. If they're irritated by the fact that they are not actually escaping the role play yet, they're still in it, that I want them to do it again. I want to see all this stuff. I've never run into anybody that does that. And we've done it, the teams I've been on, we've always done it that way. And it's been great. And it really reveals a lot to people, to you about people, how they operate under pressure, how they operate with coaching. And it's just been a real game changer for us. What's your thoughts on that? Is that bad? Good? What do you think?
Yeah, I think I love that you do that. But what I run into a lot are hiring managers that they themselves are not comfortable with role play. So they're not comfortable hosting that
Yeah.
in an interview process, right? And so in that case, I typically we try to pivot into something else, rather than try to figure out how we could coach them up to be confident in doing this in the middle of an interview process. That's sort of another thing we can work on at some point. They can work on with you, right, in your leadership training, but is then pivot to something like that what I said, the presentation or something again where you're telling them, hey, don't spend more than an hour on this, but we'd like you to XYZ. Maybe it's
Mhm.
craft an email or an outreach strategy. Like, what would it look like in our industry? The best candidates, some of the top candidates, are going to do these things in the interview without you even having to ask them. That's very rare to see, but you are going to come across those candidates that they're going to prospect you the way that they would in sales.
Mhm.
Check, right? Like one of the best SDRs I've ever hired saw my job ad and prospected me, um, and showed me what he would do without having to say, this is what I would do. He just did it. He just showed me.
Mhm.
I could see what his type of strategy would look like. Then once we got into the interview process, again, I didn't have to ask him to brainstorm with me or to tell me how he would approach the role. He just started to tell me, well, here's what I would do. If I was going to call a CFO, this is what my talk track would sound like in this role. If I was going to call, a CTO, this is what I would say. And I was like, wow, like just blowing me away because again, most salespeople are not doing those types of things. So really pay attention throughout the interview process for people that are doing those types of, whatever it is, brainstorming, no one's probably ever going to ask you to role play with them if you don't ask them, though. Um, but yeah, so
That'd be pretty wild. I'd be like,
that
ooh,
would be,
I like
I would
this
be like,
person.
you're hired.
Yes, let's roll.
Yeah.
Uh, so we've got the interview process. Is there anything after that? Is it just we get married and sail off into the sunset? What happens after the interview process?
Yeah, so once we get to you've had the appropriate people involved, we get to the end, regardless of how your process looks, whether you have a recruiter involved or not, you're moving to some sort of a verbal offer. Let's say you're ready, you're there, and this is the right person. So you've got that verbal offer, you're going to put it out there. By that point, you should basically know if the candidate is going to accept or not. This should
Mhm.
be an anticlimactic part of your process. It should not be a surprise. Now, sometimes candidates will say no because again, something wasn't uncovered along the way or something last minute happened or changed in their life. That can happen. But generally at this point, that the person is going to say yes. So we get to that stage, have your written offer letter ready to go. So this isn't like hey, we gave you a verbal and a week or two later, we're going to follow up with a written. No,
Mhm.
they will accept another job in that time frame if they are actively looking or even if they're not, someone else might come along. I've been the person to scoop somebody up in a final stage because the company decided to stop communicating with the candidate and we were able to move quickly. So once you get there, have your written offer letter ready, give them the verbal, call them, get everybody excited. Immediately following that phone call, send them the written offer letter. And then from there, you're doing it maybe contingent on some things you have going on in your internal environment. background check, drug screen, etc. Reference check if you still, if you know, you do those. I know some people still like to do those. Um, and then you're generally, you know, at the end, and then you're transitioning from the hiring process into, you know, your onboarding phase. But not letting that momentum die down. Tell your team, hey, we just brought on this person. They signed their offer letter. Get your team messaging that person, texting,
Mm.
emailing, whatever form of communication. Get them excited. And then if, let's say they're not starting for 3 weeks, what are you doing in those 3 weeks to keep them engaged? Not just, awesome, you accepted our offer letter and now we're not going to talk to you until the day before you come on with us. And meanwhile, the candidate's like, I don't know, like I haven't heard from them. It's Sunday night. I'm supposed to start tomorrow. What's going on? And
Yeah.
you know, so it's like that communication piece, and that's what runs through the thick of the entire process is solid communication. That's how you will win candidates in a competitive market, is by communicating with them, asking them the questions that other people don't, making sure that you're talking about compensation in the first call. It's clear when you're telling the truth, and candidates are surprised by that today. They're
Yeah.
surprised by it.
Yeah. And they
So,
want to work for a company like that, right?
yeah.
It doesn't have to be the perfect scenario, but if you're honest about it, then I can make an educated decision for myself and my family. Good. Well, I knew this time was going to fly by. Uh, where can people reach out to you if they have additional questions? We didn't have any time for Q&A, but if they have questions, are you open to communicating with folks offline?
Absolutely. You can reach me either at tab@thesalescollective.com. Feel free to let me know you were in today's webinar. Shoot me a question. We can have a little chat back and forth. You can also find me on LinkedIn, Tabitha Cavanaugh, or if you search probably hashtag Tabitha Recruiter, it will come up. But I do post a lot of content, so hopefully something in there will be something that will be helpful for you. But please feel free. I'd love to chat about your question and see what we can do to help you. So. Thanks
Well,
for coming today.
I really appreciate you being here, Tab. You're awesome. Everyone, thanks for hopping on today's webinar about hiring your next top seller. I know I had a blast digging into this complex subject, and we hope you take these ideas back to your crew, figure out what works best for you. If you want to step up your leadership or management game, get really serious about hiring your next rock star, hit us up at thesalescollective.com. And you can either get enrolled in my sales leadership program, or if you want, you can even work directly with Tab. And we have different levels of engagement where Tab will give you a DIY framework and she'll kind of guide you through that, or Tab will just do it all for you and you'll have your next rock star in less than 24 hours. So, whatever your situation, swing by the Sales Collective to get started. Thanks again for coming, and we'll see you next time on Sales Leadership Council webinar.
Thank you.
You
Have a
bet.
great day, everyone. See ya.